Hey everybody, this is Scott Levin, Chief Peacekeeper, and I am here with my very good friend Steve Lujan. Steve, how are you?
Doing great, Scott. Thanks for having me.
So Steve, if you probably already know Steve, or maybe many of you have seen him around by virtue of his bow tie, but Steve is known as the Medicare man. He's a Provisors member, as am I. And he has a lot of mojo going for him. A lot of people like Steve, and I just kind of wanted to introduce himself, his story, how he got into doing what he does, and advising whoever's watching it out there if they can benefit from his expertise in the Medicare field. I encourage you to connect. So, Steve, tell us, what is the Medicare man? What does the Medicare man do?
All right. Well, thanks, Scott. Essentially, what I do is I help people with their health insurance planning. So, in the space that I work with, in order to be eligible for Medicare, you have to reach the sweet age of 65 years young. Right? That's the birthday year. So, I help folks with Medicare. I help them basically sign up at the right time, sign up with the right coverage, and make sure that they're not overspending or getting caught in a tricky situation where they're not properly covered or protected.
So do people call you and have any idea like what they're facing and what's the paperwork like? And when you say get the right coverage, like what sort of options are there? I actually have no idea. Obviously, I know about Medicare generally, but I have absolutely no knowledge about it specifically.
Yeah, well, I can tell you this, it's complicated. And I first learned about Medicare as I started to help my folks out with their insurance planning. So at the surface, it's very complicated. As you start to dig in and try to figure out the details on your own, I think it becomes even more overwhelming. So I actually work with a lot of professionals, primarily financial advisors and CPAs, who try to help their clients navigate through these waters. So Medicare is tricky. I recommend that folks work with a professional, someone that can guide them, simplify the process, and make sure that they actually answer all their questions.
And so when people do normally like people entering Medicare come directly to you, or do you ever get calls from people's kids, like a 40, 45-year-old whose parent is entering it and that person's trying to help them, navigate the waters? Who
Yeah,
normally is the contact for you?
yeah. So most of the time I'm getting the referral coming from the financial professional. But as I engage more and more adult kids that are in their 30s and 40s, I basically preach to them to try to help out their parents. More often than not, parents, say that they can figure things out on their own. I think typically they can, but as adult children in their 30s and 40s, something that I think you want to be conscious of is, who's going to look after mom and dad when they're in their 70s and 80s, because there are certain rules when it comes to Medicare insurance planning that will affect the type of care that your parents receive. So all of that stuff is complicated, but I definitely recommend having adult children being a part of this conversation with their parents.
And where does like long-term care planning come in? Is that like a private thing outside of Medicare?
Yeah, and that comes, it's a great question, and it comes as a massive surprise to folks. So Medicare is simply, think of it as health insurance, hospital insurance, doctor's insurance, and you also receive some drug coverage. But what you just referred to, which is custodial care, private caregiving, is not covered by Medicare. So families either have to step in and contribute with their blood, sweat, and tears, or folks can plan ahead by buying long-term care insurance products or life insurance products or annuities that tie in a long-term care benefit. But it's a major discussion, and it's something that I'm passionate in educating folks on.
So you mentioned how you got kind of introduced to this with your parents. What is your, if you don't mind sharing a little bit more about that backstory? How do you become the Medicare man?
Yeah, I became a Medicare man by default and accident, right? And I mean this because back in 2009, right after, as we were all recovering, or some of us were recovering from the market crash, my parents were had signs of showing some health issues. So I moved them into my home with me in the city of San Marcos. And within a few short years, my mom, who had been experiencing short-term memory loss, was eventually diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So that kind of punch, that life punch, really rattled my world. So from 2009 to 2013, I put kind of my personal life on the shelf, and I became a primary caregiver for both my mother and my father. My dad, who eventually passed away, was on dialysis for 8 years, right? So here I am. At the time, I was in my mid-30s. And in some ways, I feel fortunate that I was a little bit younger and had the energy to take care of parents. But the reality is, at any age, it's extremely hard. It's mentally and emotionally crippling. Although I felt I could handle a lot of that load, the reality was I needed help. I just didn't know how to ask for it, right? So I think that's what happens to a lot of adult kids or spouses who are taking care of a loved one who's having health issues. We forget how to ask for help because we maybe feel a little bit ashamed, or maybe we just don't have the energy to share our story. But I'd say, do what we're doing here, Scott, like create a village of people who want to help and that can support you when that time comes.
So how can people reach you and get help and reach someone with true expertise in the field that can provide guidance, answers? I know Steve from off screen, and he is someone that always volunteers to provide information. So he's one of the good guys, a real advocate for people. So Steve, how do people, reach you? What's the best way, et cetera?
Yeah, thank you. Folks can visit my website. It's helpmemedicareman.com. Folks can schedule a call, a Zoom meeting. That might be the easiest with smartphones these days. Otherwise, folks can call me directly. You can call me directly on my mobile, my direct line, my business line, and other LinkedIn is a great community. Right, LinkedIn is a powerful community where we can continue to build out our networks. So I just make it easy on folks. Right, website, direct telephone number, LinkedIn.
Great. So it's helpmemedicareman.com.
Yes.
Okay, cool. That's a cool site. I like it.
Hey man, in my world, it's easy. Help me, Medicare man. That's it. That's really what folks are looking for, a little help.
All right. Well, listen, everybody, get some help when you need it, and learn, educate yourself. Steve, the Medicare man, Lujan is there for you. Helpmemedicareman.com. I love it. Thanks, Steve, for joining us.
Scott, thank you for having me. This was awesome.